Right, good evening everyone. Welcome along to another video from the MX Fibre Restorer Lights Up, Lights Down channel. If you're watching our videos, you would have just seen a video of me in France and also telling a story of what happened. But there is actually been, so that trip actually happened a couple of months ago now, and this video is being done to sort of elaborate really more on, I divulged pretty much what happened, but I didn't really explain exactly what happened and the reasons why I've now also changed this engine. Since you've watched that video, the engine's been back out of this car, completely stripped down and had new parts. So I didn't do any videos on that. So this is a little story of really what happened. So without going over what really happened in France, so the engine was rebuilt 2 weeks before I went to France and the running period, and I was sort of kidding myself a little bit when I did that video. There was a very small sound in the background to my engine, which I was sort of hoping might disappear or not get worse, or that was how it was going to be. So going to France, the first real thing that I realized that something was wrong was that when I was cruising to France, my engine temperatures were running hotter than what I would say would be normal. They were about sort of 10 degrees hotter than normal. This normally runs at about 82 degrees. I've got a lower thermostat in it, and it was sitting at like 90, 92 all the way there, even without sort of doing any real speed. A couple of times I did sort of like increase my speed and the engine temps would get hotter. So I was thinking, okay, is this just a cooling issue thing? Is there something wrong? I wasn't too bothered about it. Got to Honfleur and I just idling and then just sort of just blipping the throttle just a little bit. There was this, it wasn't a rattle. It was just something I could hear that just is never made before, but still wasn't really of any concern. So that was that. And so we went to what happened in Rouen, what happened in Honfleur, you all know about. So the trip to Rouen was a matter of, so I had to get to where I was going pretty quickly. I pretty much sat at 100 miles an hour, pretty much all the way there on the tolls to gain time. And my oil temps on the car were over 130 degrees. Engine temp was sitting at like 95. It was even hotter, and I was at this point I was like, I need to get to where I'm going. I had a very sneaky suspicion that there wasn't something quite right in the engine, and there was a chance I think that I was going to have to pull it apart again anyway. So at this point I was like, it is what it is, and yeah, I sort of did just send it really. We got to Rouen. We made it to the pharmacy. When I came back out to the car, that noise had got louder. Still wasn't loud, but it was noticeably louder than what it was before I made that trip. So there was definitely something that wasn't quite right in the first engine build. Now, I changed a few things when I put that car back together. I increased the oil pressure. I think, Ollie, what oil pressure was I running? It was 72, wasn't it? And I think I went up to 84.
Two ships.
Yeah, I went up to 4, didn't I? So it's 84, I think that is. Yeah. So I increased the oil pressure. And in my haste to get this car put back together, I also put a Hermetic head gasket on, which was a smidge thinner than the stock one. Now that alone, with the clearances, it shouldn't have made any difference. But what I do think was the problem was when I had this car apart, I was doing it in a room within the house, which we're going to be doing another conversion in, so it doesn't get used. I had all the bits laid out on the table, and I did come back to that engine at one point, and the pistons that I had numbered 1, 2, 3, 4 were not in their places. I've got a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I think my 3-year-old went in there and sort of moved stuff around. So there is a chance that when I put the pistons back in, the pistons didn't actually go back into the cylinders that they should have gone back in. So that's the story of where I was in France. I was still sort of hoping that this noise was either good. I was going to be able to sort of find something out, but it wasn't. So I got back from France, used the car, and the noise was just getting louder. So on the timescale of things, we then went to the National Rally, the MX-5 National Rally, which I nursed. I did drive the car there, but I nursed it there. And it was then I spoke to Dan at Boffey, which I was very keen for him to come and have a look and a listen, because it was just a very strange sound. I couldn't. The sound was coming from literally in the middle of the block. It wasn't bottom end. It wasn't top end. It sounded like it was something in the middle of the block, and it wasn't sort of piston slap. It was just an odd noise. And Dan came over and had a look, and he you know, he's a very knowledgeable guy, and he was very, very helpful, but he sort of wanted to sort of help me out in terms of you know, like we can look at, he wanted to look at the engine and, you know, offered his services and stuff, and I appreciated that. But I also felt like when I do something and I'm doing something that I haven't done before, I don't like failing at it. And I felt like, you know, I put the first engine together, I did the second one, and I think the pistons got mixed up. I think that's where the problem came from. But there was just something, I wanted to know what it was. What if I had done something wrong? I wanted to find it. I wanted to take it apart and go from there. So I said to Dan, look, I'm going to have a go at redoing this engine. If it goes wrong again, then he can have a go. So I then took the car off the road, stripped the engine down, and you know, we measured what I'd done, and there was nothing obvious really in the build that was to say that it was, all the main bearings were okay, the crank was okay, the rods that I put new Manley rods in, they were all in spec. There was nothing worn there. You know, we just couldn't really explain what it was. Didn't find anything that was really the problem, but there was this sound. It was an odd sound. It went away when it was warmed up, but by this point at the National Rally, even when after driving it there, even when it had warmed up, it was still there now. So whatever it was getting worse. So I then decided to rebuild the engine again. So this time I ditched the pistons and bought I got Wiseco pistons, wasn't it? I'm gonna just put Ollie on the camera. Yeah, no, the ones that are in there now, they're Wiseco ones, aren't they?
Yeah, you can't see the text.
So you'll know the compression. What pistons were they?
8 to 1s, 8.4, 1 to 1, I believe.
That's the Wiseco ones, wasn't
That's
it?
The Wiseco one.
Yeah, and the Supertech
ones are advertised as 9 to 1s.
Yeah.
They're actually something like 8 point. I think they're similar. I think they round up.
Yeah, very similar, but I think the Wiseco are just maybe a slight difference anyway.
Yeah.
But they're Wiseco, so cheers, Ollie. Thanks for the specs.
Sure.
So yeah, I went with the Wiseco pistons, and I put my max speeding rods back in. And weirdly enough, we measured the tolerances on the max speeding rods and the Manley rods, and I did it with Ollie, and the max speedy rods were more consistent, weren't they?
Yeah. Weight with the weight and the actual size of the collet as well.
Yeah. So we I'll just spin this around. So I did it with Ollie. So we weighed everything, and yeah, it was just they were just more in spec with what they were supposed to be, weren't they?
Yeah, for Manley, they were supposed to be like double the price nearly. Yeah. They were like actually worse.
So I was on that note, I was pretty convinced that the Manley rods that I put in weren't a problem. We thought that the it's the Gungen pin, isn't it, in the pistons?
The one that holds the
Gungen pin, yeah. That's what it's called, isn't it? Wrist pin. Wrist pin, Gungen pin. I'm sure they can be both. Either way.
Wrist pin.
Yeah, wrist pin. So I'm not an engine builder, but so we thought maybe the wrist pins in the pistons were seized or not moving, which could have been a cause, but they were all freely moving as well. That was something that Dan might have said could have happened, because he asked me when I took the old pistons out and that wrist pin, did it just pop out? And they did one side, but on one side of a couple of pistons they were tight, which he explained that could have been due to some sort of like what's the word I'm looking for? So a lot of heat, which would have been induced by either some timing, like knock right on the edge. But either way, it's possible that the piston was slightly distorted, and that could have been causing the problem. They were all moving, so there was just nothing when I took this engine apart that decided to do it. Now, what I did decide to do when I took this engine apart was to buy a tool, and I'll just lift the bonnet up. I thought it'd be funny just to put it in here, but it's now just wasting time. So, new engine. I decided to buy a cheap honing tool, or honing tool, reglazing tool. And okay, so if the piston was the cause of the problem, I'm not going to put new pistons in and re-hone the bores, which is something I probably should have done on the first rebuild, but chose not to do it. And I thought I'd give it a go. And when I did tell Dan this, he was he was a bit gobsmacked about it all. But I just wanted to have another go at doing it. And I thought, if this doesn't work, then that. So we rebuilt the engine. On the old engine, I used King bearings. I went back to ACL bearings, measured the tolerances. I put my max speeding rods back in, Wiseco pistons, and sort of, I wouldn't say it's a rehone, I suppose it's a reglaze, isn't it? But, taught myself how to do it, watched a few YouTube videos, and decided that I was more than capable to do it. So I did that, put the engine back together, and it's now been in for quite some time now, and it's been fine. I also lowered the oil pressure back to 72 psi and put the correct head gasket back on, but with measuring the head gasket shouldn't have been an issue, and I don't think it was. There was no marks on top of the head at all. If there was any contact, it was just nothing there at all. And yeah, it's been okay. It actually runs better. I changed the valve stem guide seals as well, because I was using the Supertech ones, and I think that they were leaking just a little bit. If the car was idling for a little while and then you just sort of blip the throttle, it wasn't a lot of smoke. But on that first rebuild, which I did just before I went to France, it wasn't happy. I'd pull up to a set of lights, and if the wind was blowing towards like the front of the car, you'd get a whiff of like oil. You couldn't see anything, but you could smell it was like burning oil. It just wasn't right. Whereas now it seems to be all right. So that's it. There's been a lot of progress, a lot of things I've been doing on this car, which wasn't filmed, but yeah, it was a pain in the arse for me for quite a while. So yeah, so Cheryl, the wife, she wasn't too pleased with me when it all happened, but it was just one of those things, and just had to live with it, really. It was a very memorable weekend for those circumstances, just like the excitement. I mean, it was quite fun, actually, just trying to get to Rouen before a certain time and just flying down the toll roads. I don't think I got caught speeding, but I'll find out maybe in some months to come, because Gareth got caught speeding. I think in France it took nearly a year to come through, so hopefully that didn't happen. So that's where we are with the car at the moment. So everything is running good. Thanks to Dan at Boffy for his advice on maybe what to do and what not to do, and helping us out. Yeah, and also when I was trying to get that Cometic head gasket, no one in the country had one, and I ended up ordering one from Poland to sort the car out. So it's back on the road, it's running. The reason why I was doing some filming around the car is one of the comments in the last video was, "You've got a lovely car, but why am I pointing the camera at me?" That wasn't supposed to be the case, because on the Sunday the plan was to go to Normandy. Cheryl was going to get out the car, do some filming of me driving, and also do some shots of more outside the car, but that didn't happen. But yes, next time I'm doing a trip, I am going to try and do some filming of the outside of the car with a GoPro attached, so it's not inside the car as much. So yeah, that's where we are. I'm quite pleased that I managed to sort it out. I haven't booted the car yet. I really don't know how it's going to perform, because the pistons are a slightly lower compression, but it is going to be going up to Boffy Racing, and Dan is going to put it on the rolling road, I think, next year at some point when it's back up and running, maybe, if that offer's still there, which I think it is. And he's going to rolling road it. It needs to go back on the rolling road now, because it's had so much change internally. I think it'll be back to where it was, but I am going to turn it down. I think I'm going to just turn it down just a smidge. So I've already destroyed a few gearboxes, although Dan might tune it in a way which it doesn't make as much power, like lower end. But I mean, I can do that. I can just turn the boost down, but it's just too much fun. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that sheds a bit more light on the trip and what really happened. This video is going to come out, I think, pretty quickly just after that one, and then the video for the show is going to come out, which is already done. But this is literally just a quick tell the story a bit more, because at the time that French trip was done, I was sort of hoping that noise was going to go away, and then on the way back it sort of made pretty clear that I didn't think it was, and that week leading up to the show it sort of got a bit worse. But there you go. So hope you enjoyed this video on what really happened, of a more in-depth that weekend, and then yeah, enjoy the rest of the videos coming. See you then. Bye bye. So just when you thought this video was finished, I probably should elaborate on the fact that when we were in the workshop reglazing / rehoning the bores, I was using a dial bore gauge to make sure that the cylinders were still in check with distances with the pistons. So it wasn't a case of just going in there with a honing gauge and hoping for the best. I spent a lot more time when I put this engine back together, like measuring tolerances and clearances, and the biggest piston to wall clearance was just over 4 thou on one, which, you know, it's at the higher end of it, but you know what, it was fine. Put it in and everything seems to be okay. So until something dramatically goes wrong with it, I think it's going to be okay. My engine temperatures now sit exactly where they were before the car got taken apart. You know, it just seems to be back to how it was and happier. So what was wrong on that other one, I don't know. But just so anyone was like, I didn't make clear that it wasn't just a case of just like putting it in the cylinders and just hoping for the best. No, I was measuring everything, because even though I was doing it myself, I still wanted to make sure it was fine. Whereas the first time I did it, I was just a bit slap it back together, it'll be fine. So that approach might work sometimes. It didn't in these circumstances. So yeah, just before anyone sort of starts making comments, well, you should have measured or blah blah blah, I did dial bore gauge the clearances between the pistons and the cylinders, and everything else was all in check. So just to let you guys know that is what was happened, and that's what I did. Okay, cheers, bye.